face when they come to China. And now I focus on consulting my clients, which are like, I would say, two different groups. So this positive group I like, which are coming to China, they like thinking of coming to China, and I help them to protect their intellectual property first, and to tell them what they have to pay attention to before.
Hey guys, welcome back to our channel once again. This is Jasur from Shanghai SRIT, and today we have a special guest from Moscow going live. And Zukhra, why don't you introduce yourself? That would be better.
Yeah, hi Jasur. Firstly, thank you for having me, of course. And thank you for the audience to listen to this video. I hope they'll find it very useful. So my name is Zukhra. I'm based in Shanghai, and I'm offering legal consulting services for businesses coming to China. Now, I mean, I'm stuck in Moscow, as you mentioned, but it's all right. This should pass also. I'm consulting my clients mostly on corporate issues, as I've mentioned, and I mostly focus on intellectual property because I feel like it's a very interesting issue, and businesses.
It's a very hot topic as well, yes.
Exactly. So they face a lot of issues concerning intellectual property and its protection. Then I also address labor disputes and contract law. These are the vocal points of my consulting.
Okay, great. So let me start from the beginning. You said that you've been practicing IP protection here in China, and you run, corporate consulting. A corporate legal consulting business as well. So when did you actually, start this business, and why China? Okay, can you tell us about a little bit about that part?
Yeah, a little bit of my background. So thank you for this question. Actually, I think it's quite interesting to know how people come to China and why, and all the reasons. So basically, my path, let's say Silk Road, from Moscow to Beijing first, and then to Shanghai, started from studying Chinese, like for the most of us, I guess. So back in Moscow, during my bachelor's, I was studying Chinese language, Chinese culture, economy, and everything basically. So it was a very complex program. And then I just decided to narrow it a bit and to focus on Chinese law. That's why I went to Shanghai for doing my master's.
Right.
But so when I was studying in university for my master's, of course, I had a very good theoretical foundation, let's say, because I was doing some research. I had very good professors and stuff. But I still felt that I needed some practice. So I started interning with a law firm. And then I started getting like
back in Moscow or in China?
No, already in Shanghai, because I was doing my master's in Shanghai. And then, so this is how I just started seeing these challenges that foreign businesses mostly face when they come to China. And now I focus on consulting my clients, which are like, I would say, two different groups. So this positive group I like, which are coming to China, they like thinking of coming to China, and I help them to protect their intellectual property first, and to tell them what they have to pay attention to before entering the Chinese market. And the other group, which I like even more, I think, that are already based in China, and they have issues, and then they reach out to me asking for consulting or for helping them out. And this is when things get interesting.
So, all right, sounds really interesting. So you talked about your clients, and this is an interesting area as well. So do you mostly serve foreign clients who are doing business with China, or do you also serve local Chinese companies?
No, they're mostly foreign clients, because I actually focus on these things that they might not comprehend and that they might not predict when they think about expanding to China or start working with China. While the local businesses are a bit different. Of course, I also communicate with local businesses, because if there's a dispute, usually it's a dispute between a foreign business
right,
and a
right,
Chinese student, or a foreign employer, for example, when they open foreign owned enterprise here in China. Well, they're in China now. And for example, Chinese employee. So this cultural background I had before is really helping me to serve as a bridge between China
exactly.
and other countries.
All right. Okay, so let's get back to the previous question a little bit. So the part of the question was, why did you choose China in the legal sphere? Because, you know, most of the time people, when they are lawyers, especially international lawyers, and especially when it's IP law, people sort of, you know, try to go around China. Maybe they want to practice in some of the Western countries where laws are pretty straightforward and easy to practice, maybe. So what is your, you know, reason of, you know, entering China?
Yes.
Aren't
Well,
there any, you know, barriers?
well, yeah, of course. I mean, as I told you before, I was already specifying on China and Asian region actually in general. But then I feel like China is very specific in terms of law, and that's what you see when you actually work, for example, with American clients, because they totally misunderstand China. I feel like not only American, but like just foreign clients, you know, and they're different. Some of them think, oh, China is so easy, you know, the law is just nothing. I'll download a draft of the contract from Google and use the sample of my Chinese factors, it's going to be all right. Or some people also think that, oh, China is something magical, something so mysterious, you know, I'll never go there and understand nothing. Nothing works there. It's so corrupted. Usually it's kind of negative thinking. So I thought it would be very interesting for me to do some research on China law and then just start working with it.
All right, yeah, exactly. I mean, if I may add as well, so we see this all the time, you know, on the internet, that just like you mentioned, most of the clients who want to enter Chinese market, they have this generalized, you know, opinion about the laws, about the customs here. So yeah, they say that, okay, yeah, it's really, really tough, and even if you start some kind of business, the government is not going to let you do that, or, you know, or the laws here is really hard to practice or enforce, maybe. So yeah, I mean, this is really a good example, you know, that you're saying that you've been practicing it here, and that we can now kind of, you know, try to assure the clients that this is most of the information on the internet is just stereotypes and generalizations that not listen.
And a lot of misconceptions. For example, I liked your video about starting a company in Hong Kong and China. And I think that was very helpful, because sometimes they say, oh, well, Hong Kong is the same. You know, it's like absolutely the same. What's the point? Or something else, for example, if I register trademark in Shanghai, would it work in Beijing? You know, these are two Chinese cities. Obviously, it will work.
I know. I mean, this is kind of, you know, the separating the Hong Kong companies and mainland China companies is kind of in every client situation. This is the starting point to us. You know, when they approach us, they say, okay, I have a Hong Kong company. I want to sponsor myself a visa to live in China. So, okay, let me start from. That's why we create a lot of content in the form of PDF. By the way, yeah, people who are watching this, they can go online and download so that they have the, you know, preliminary the information before kind of approaching the company.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's very helpful.
It saves a lot of time, actually. All right.
Yeah.
So let's continue then. So the overall atmosphere, when we talk about the you know, business atmosphere in China, can you tell us about are there any you know, risks when entering the Chinese markets? Any legal risks, so to speak? That
yeah, of
clients
course.
should be aware. For example, you know, it is right that, you know, you can do your own research online, but like you mentioned, the information provided, it's so general that it's really hard to find the exact information. And most of all, it's very, very tough to make a decision based on that generalized information. So as an expert, what kind of risks can you mention?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's a whole bunch of challenges that foreign businesses face when they start working with China or they start operating in China already. So basically, I would say that there are two different groups of cooperation with China. First, when there's no company in China, no representative offices in China, nothing, but they just work, let's say, with Chinese suppliers.
Mm-hmm.
And then the main issues would be intellectual property, again, for sure, because you still have to protect it. I usually tell my clients, even before thinking of marketing to China, you should protect your intellectual property before that.
Mm-hmm.
I just had this very recent case when Russian factory was working with the Chinese partner, and then they said, oh, well, like, I trust this partner I work with them for 20 years or whatever. I really trust them. Like, there is no point of them registering my trademark in Russian, so with Russian letters, in China. Then I do a checkup, and they registered the name of Chinese factory. And then I tell my client that, okay, this happened. So he contacts the factory, and the factory says, well, I did it actually for you. So that no one else in China registers, before you. So this is very important.
It's a bummer,
then another thing I would also say is doing a prior due diligence of your Chinese supplier. And usually, like, I tell my clients how to do that, because there is some, like, just a basic research they can do themselves even.
And most of the information is public as well,
Exactly, like through open sources. And then maybe they will try and, for example, ask for help a company as yours, or they ask me just to help them out. But usually, it doesn't cost that much. And then for these companies working with Chinese suppliers, so like not represented in China, I would also recommend to really pay attention to their contracts. This is very important.
Yeah, especially not use the templates, right? Ready-to-use templates.
Exactly. And don't use Google Translate. I know, like, these things I'm saying now are very basic and maybe seem even funny, but when you work with that and when you see it on almost everyday basis, you're not surprised at anything. No, so at least make a contract in Chinese language,
Definitely. I mean, I 100% agree with what you say. Honestly speaking, I don't really, now this is what's happening. I don't really differentiate between a basic information or basic the advice we give or the professional advice we give, because most of the clients, there are several reasons, but generally speaking, most of the clients, they're not they're not too much concerned about these legal risks, because most of them, again, they come from the countries, especially Western countries, where the law, the enforcement is too strong, and the power of law is there. It's like a given. And the dodgy companies or the fake products are so rare to find. That's why probably they just take it as a normal situation, and they don't pay attention to this kind of things.
Yeah, very right. I totally agree.
They don't really expect that somebody would go ahead and register the trademark on their behalf. You don't see it in most of the countries, but you see in China, I mean, this is not something that every time I tell the clients that this is not something that they should be scared of. It's just because Chinese population is too big, and you have to be ready to meet all sorts of people here. If you go to smaller countries like in Europe, for example, Cyprus, or I don't know, Luxembourg or Switzerland, everybody, most of the people are so decent because there's a small number of population, easy to control, easy to enforce the laws here. But in here, that's for the government as well, it's kind of a challenge to, to control all the companies and factories, right? So
yeah, I totally agree. You're absolutely right. And that what makes me think about actually this system that China uses for trademarking again. Because in China, it's first to file. So whoever files a trademark first, usually in like 97% of the cases, will be the owner of the trademark. While, for example, again, in the US and a bunch of other countries, Australia, India, if I'm not mistaken, it's first to use. So if you use your trademark in your business first, okay, you're the owner, and you can actually say, like you have some evidence that you're using this trademark in your business. Then, all right, you're the owner of the trademark. In China, it's the other way around.
Right. Yeah, very good piece of information here, guys. Pay attention to that. Okay, in China, it's a little bit different, right? So when you register first, you are the owner. Okay, it's not on the basis of first use. All right.
Exactly. That's why it should be done very early.
Yeah, definitely. So next question will be IP protection here. How enforceable is it? Especially, when foreign company or foreign individual and the local company or local individual is involved in this litigation. Is it really? Again, let me make it a little bit, clear. Why am I asking this question? It's again because of those generalizations. On the blogs, on the internet, on the so-called specialist websites, they say that it's extremely hard to enforce law here, especially when you are suing the local company or local person here. So from your experience, what is this?
Yes, I know what you mean, because yes, even in just some personal conversations, my friends tell me like, well, probably it's not enforceable. What's the point of fighting and fighting for justice or whatever? Which I think is totally a myth, because if it was not enforceable, I mean, it wouldn't just function. So many factories, so many companies, the business will just stop if the regulations are not right and if the law is not working. But again, in regards of intellectual property protection, the owners of the intellectual property, which is usually copyrights, patents, and trademarks. Well, I would always recommend to start from trademarks because it's usually simpler and it can be registered for almost every company. While for patents, for example, you have to prove certain things, and you have to really be creative and patents are different things. So I would usually recommend to start from a trademark. And I would say, again, like going back to the question of litigation, it is totally enforceable. As long as you act simple and consistent with Chinese law, of course, you will win. I'm totally sure about that. But for example, if you have your trademark protected, let's say in India, so you're the owner of the trademark only in India. Don't expect it to be protected in China. China is a different country. And it doesn't mean that someone stole your trademark. Well, kinda, technically they didn't steal it. You didn't have it registered in China. Otherwise, they won't be able to do it. And actually, Chinese authorities are quite strict about it. So if they find an infringement, they usually stop the manufacturing and also the customs. They can stop the product that is infringing. And that's why also it's very important to protect your trademark in China, because if your competitor, let's say, files a trademark first, and then you're still producing your product in China, which less and less people do, I guess, but still, they can block your product at the customs, saying, well, you either buy your trademark from me for $1 million, or I just stop your products and you do whatever you want.
Yeah, I guess this is where most of the practical and plus widespread issues here, I guess. I mean, and plus, you mentioned that most of the business owners, they wrongfully assume that if they if they registered their trademark in some other country, they assume that it is automatically protected in China as well. So for that, I just want to put it there that, for people, especially fresh owners of businesses in China, we have a special course. We did it, we're doing it on a monthly basis. So it's kind of a basic legal knowledge for company owners in China. Just, going to give very, very basic information, very basic knowledge that, that every company owner should have, kind of speaking. Before, these are very basic things, but still, especially when it comes to, structuring your company or taking up a local partner, or, going and registering a trademark, or, all this, patent, very basic knowledge is going to give you actually a guidance, where to start and how to take that, navigation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And starting actually from the process of opening a company. Because I think you also did some videos about that, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
and that's another, challenge. So many things happening here, so many misunderstandings.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, literally, recently I got this, request, kind of question. A person is asking that I register a company under my friend's name, but I am the investor. I'm not listed though. He says, okay. I say, okay, this is where you lose, man. You don't do that. If you're an investor, you list yourself. You have to have that, your name listed somewhere in the structure of the company as a shareholder or something. Otherwise, this is very basic, but you see, there are tons of people, making these mistakes. So that's why it's better to educate a little bit before you actually, decide and register a company there, right? And it's not only about China, right? It is everywhere. It is
of course,
all the countries here. Because people, in business, once you start a business, you don't expect that everybody is your friend, right? There are people who are ready to take advantage of you in a slightest weakness, right?
Exactly. And sometimes people trust too much to their Chinese partner, business partner, or to their employee. And then where, again, for example, labor disputes arise from. Because even like a simple thing of signing a labor contract, and for some reason an foreign employer, will usually postpone it, saying, oh, I want to see, if this employee is suitable. I want to see them work for a couple of months. I really trust them, it's okay, we don't sign a contract. And then a Chinese employee sues them and gets the compensation.
Exactly. Yes. This is happening really, really, common here, right? Frequently. So when you talk about the labor contract, let me ask you this. For example, because of this COVID-19, the virus, a lot of foreigners now, they were kind of some of them said that it's mentioned on their contract. They were expecting some payments, kind of, this is kind of a force majeure situation, right? They're not working, but on the contract it says that the company should compensate them somehow. They should keep paying them. But they are, mentioning that the most of the companies now, they are not paying. So how to deal with this kind of situation? Is it
well, I mean, of course, every situation is specific, and you really have to see the contract, and even employment internal regulations, because there's a whole bunch of documents and papers the employee should sign when they are start working in a company. No matter foreign employee or Chinese employee, here there is no difference. And there's also a document, a signing off letter, when someone is fired or someone is just terminating the labor relations, employment relations, they should sign this paper too. It's not just like, okay, now you're fired, and
Of
zaijian.
course, yeah, there's a certain
Goodbye.
procedure to go through, right?
I'm not paying you salary anymore.
Right.
Regarding your question, I feel like, of course, they have to pay, but usually it really depends on the employer. So what an employer could do, at least with the foreigners who are, for example, stuck back in their countries, they could actually say, okay, I'm terminating your contract, and I'm paying you, for example, this and this compensation. And they talk, they're negotiating. Or if an employee feels like his rights are infringed and violated, of course he could go to arbitrary commission. But the thing is that when he gets to China, that's another question. And if he is going to fly to China just to fight for 1 month's salary,
everything comes back to the costs, right?
That.
Expenses, yes. If it's worth, then yeah.
Yeah.
Everything boils down to these expenses. If it works,
exactly.
You're saying that it is enforceable, definitely.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Okay, yeah. So I'm just asking, the questions that I received. I've been receiving most of the time from the people. Because I mentioned
they're usually the same. They are usually the same.
Yeah, they are usually the same. It's just like I mentioned, the audience here in my channel, they most of them, they know that I have a law degree as well from the UK LLB, but my specialty is not intellectual property or contracts. My specialty is more like general. Corporate consulting. I specialized on offshore banking, offshore financing, this kind of sphere. So that's why our companies we specialize on company structure, company structuring, restructuring, registering worldwide. But you're the expert in this sphere, so I'm directing the questions to you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm very specific. I told you, like, I'm not a China expert, and whoever calls me, like, you as a China expert, could you tell me your opinion? I'm like, well, firstly, I'm not a China expert,
No, I mean, your profile actually is slightly different, If you pay attention to the most of the so-called China experts or the expats who practice the same the part of law, the IP protection and all these patents and contracts, most of the time they are negative. And that's one of the reasons why I approached you, actually. Your posts are more positive, and I didn't see any single negative, kind of mood there. But unfortunately, most of the people, expats, on their blogs, on their posts, they keep complaining, say, don't invest in China. Maybe the other countries are better option, or the Hong Kong is better option. And this is kind of indirectly affecting most of the foreign-owned businesses here. For example, here I always tell the clients, okay, there are so many advantages that China offers to you, but of course there are some downsides as well. So you have to know and accept those downsides before making a decision. If you're afraid, if you're not flexible, if you don't want to, fight for your rights, or if you don't want to, if you just assume that it's one of those Western countries, or it's going to be just like America, or it's going to be just like Europe, please don't enter. Yeah, but
exactly.
Yeah, this
just
doesn't mean,
yeah,
exactly. But this doesn't mean that your rights are protected here. Your rights are absolutely protected here, but slightly different way here, right? Bureaucracy exists here, but the going around the laws and through the litigation, slightly different than most of the people are used to.
Yeah, right. Absolutely, I agree with you. And also, just the whole atmosphere and the whole approach of Chinese people towards business, I feel it's very friendly. I don't know if you noticed, but I think like the majority of Chinese people I know, even though they're employed and they work for a company, they still have some small business on the side. Either it's a flower shop, or nail salon, or just selling oranges on WeChat and Taobao, you know, they still making some money out of this like salary separate and then some money small business.
Most of them.
So entrepreneurship is just embedded in Chinese culture.
I would say, yeah, it's exactly embedded, and it's in their blood actually. Very hardworking, and always trying to find extra sources of income. Same with my Chinese friends. And another thing I just want to include, since we started this the topic, most of the Chinese people actually, you know, they might sound sometimes, you know, too protective of the country, or too protective, or too, you know, patriotic, or inclined towards that side. And this, you know, sounds a little bit, you know, kind of racism, or you know, the generalizations are coming from, you know, that foreigners and expats feel like, okay, these people are not open-minded, they are too attached to their country, etc., etc. On this topic, what I say to the clients is they have to accept it as a cultural norm here, right? They have been, you know, they have been educated like that, right? The whole atmosphere here, starting from the kindergarten, they educate the people like that. That's it. I mean, as an entrepreneur, for me, it doesn't make difference. If a person loves the country too much, I don't care, right? We are here to make money. That's it, right? So this is
respect the country.
I mean, I'm not going to try to judge them, or I'm not going to try to re-educate them. You should be like that. You should not be protective of your country because of their this and that. You know, they're doing this in a you know, political level. So I say, okay, you should not be doing that, right?
Exactly. Just be realistic, be simple, you know, and don't make too many generalizations and have too many misconceptions when you come to China. That's the most, you know, general advice.
Should be, yeah, generally speaking, people should be, you know, they should stick to their goal, right? When they're coming to do business, just mind your own business. That's it. Don't try to, you know, change the people, the whole culture. And your life will be much easier in China, especially.
It's true, and even then, you know, China is very different. Shanghai, for example, has an amazing entrepreneurship community and so many foreigners and stuff, and you know, they're thriving. It's okay. And Beijing, of course, they're like big cities, I understand, and it's easier to actually have all these like procedures done in Beijing and Shanghai, because they will not be surprised when you go to bank and open a bank account as a foreigner, while in some small towns or maybe even villages, they will be like, wow, a foreigner, you know, they're still surprised, they're still not used to it. But again, as you said, it's just cultural and social difference between China and maybe some other countries which are more open to foreign influence.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, that's one of the reasons, guys, I keep recommending Shanghai and Tier 1 cities. Always Beijing, Shenzhen, yeah, the top cities. This is where you should base your business if you really want to have a, you know, easier experience. So anyway, I've got some more questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay, actually, this is related to litigation again. How does it work? For example, you know, if somebody wants to sue a Chinese factory, if you can tell us practical steps, how they should start the procedure.
Well, of course, firstly, you have to see a contract, and let's say, like, why are you suing them? What is it a labor dispute? Is it intellectual property infringement? Is it just a contract regulations violation? Because Chinese law is very contract based, so people assume that whatever is put in the contract should work and should be enforced. Whatever is outside the contract, well, I mean, that means a very lousy business, you know? So, for example, if you work with Chinese supplier and Chinese factory, and for example, you show them your molds to make like something, I don't know, some technology, but then you put in the contract the price, whatever, the time, and then they violate your intellectual property. So basically, they start making the same product and register the patent, this mold, under their name. Well, they haven't infringed anything because you didn't put it into your contract specifically.
Right. It was their mistake first, in the first place.
Exactly. So first step, I would say, work on your contract. And the very basic thing is that it has to be China-centered. It has to be in Chinese language, and it has to comply with Chinese law. And the place of arbitration, that also is very important. I would totally recommend to put it China, because I understand the way of thinking of, let's say, a business owner from Switzerland. He thinks, well, in my country, for sure, I'll get the justice. And if something happens, you know, for sure, I'll sue them in Switzerland. Okay, if you're right, you'll sue the Chinese factory, the Chinese supplier, the Chinese agent in Switzerland, and you'll probably win. But then enforcing
is another question.
China, it will take you so much time and so much expenses. So it's just easier not to enforce it, honestly. I know just like maybe 1 or 2 successful stories of enforcing a foreign decision in China.
Okay.
So
can you clarify this last part here? Why do you think it's really hard to enforce a foreign for example, the court decision in China?
Well, firstly, it's of course, the question of bureaucracy, because you have to like notarize, legalize, and then this document, for example, is already, you know, it was issued like so much time ago, and then it was legal, and the legalization has an expiration period. So you know, this document is already, you have to legalize it over again. So this is the main issue, I think. And then secondly, Chinese courts, to be honest, are quite reluctant making these things work. And then finding, you know, probably by the time you actually make it work in China, I mean, your foreign court decision, the Chinese company would already like go bankrupt and just shut down. So there's not much point. Although, for example, with labor disputes, I would totally recommend to go, especially in big cities like Shanghai and Beijing, the cities I have experience in. You totally should go, and if you feel like it's worth it, I mean, the compensation you want to get is worth it, and I mean, you discuss it with your lawyer also, because sometimes people think, oh, you know, I'll win $1 million from this contract because of this, and this hidden expenses. But if you start looking at the documents, it's not true. But anyways, I will totally encourage people to go to arbitration and not be afraid of it, especially, again, in Shanghai and Beijing.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I back this statement up as well. So especially in Beijing and Shanghai, you know, first of all, the business community here much more mature. And especially with regards to hosting foreign businesses, foreign companies. If you look at the history, Shanghai business history goes back to, you know, hundreds of years since foreigners started doing business here. So it's coming from that experience, right? If you, for example, like you said, go to a smaller city, even, you know, some city like the virus started, Wuhan. Wuhan is trying to be one of the business cities in China, and it's attracting a lot of foreign startups as well. But, you know, comparatively speaking, you know, if you really want to have that, you know, international atmosphere, at least a better protection, you have to be in bigger cities than yet, you know, you have to be.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. This makes things easier.
Much easier. So Okay, let me ask a little bit, a personal, if I may, question related to your profession, obviously. So I know that, most of the foreigners, foreign businesses, they are more, kind of, it is a generalized, concept as well, like a mindset. They say that, okay, if I want to enter the Chinese market, maybe it's better to find a local lawyer, Chinese lawyer. So is it affecting your career in any way? Like, maybe
Yeah, I know.
the company from the point of competition, you're trying to
Exactly.
compete with the local
Yeah, of course.
experts?
Of course, I know what you mean. And this is actually a good question because usually I also deal with these companies.
Mm-hmm.
But I deal with them when they are already got into trouble with a local lawyer, and then they start like looking for someone, for a foreigner, or like at least someone who speaks good English, good Russian, and can put it simple and clear for them, like what's happening. So yeah, like I have a plenty of examples and I'm not blaming Chinese lawyers. I'm sure there are like a lot of very good professionals and like very decent people, let's say. But most of the times they are huge companies and they don't really pay attention to a client, like on one-on-one consulting,
Right.
because when client want a consulting and they want advice from lawyer, legal advice, they want it to be on time, they want it to be simple so they can comprehend it and understand it and like no questions, and they want it to be in their own language usually, which is like justified, I totally understand that. But on the other hand, I also want to say that there is mistake when, let's say, a US company comes to China and they say, oh, I don't need Chinese expertise, I'll just hire, like, I'll give the task to my American lawyer. He works with our patents, with our trademarks or whatever in like all over the world. And it's okay, China is the same, he will manage in China. And usually because they don't know the specifics of China.
Exactly.
And
yes.
China business, I'm sure you totally know that. You also experience it, your clients.
Yep.
They make so many mistakes again, and then they have to get back to a Chinese lawyer, or they have to get back, from China.
Or to somebody like us, right, who are on the ground, practicing. Let me just continue from the point where, or add a little bit information from the point where you mentioned that, Chinese companies, the decent ones, normally are too big. And they just receive all the clients like a general client, not a one-to-one. They don't offer one-to-one experience, right? So this is what I keep mentioning to our clients. When they especially touch the topic of price, the quotation, and they say, okay, your price is slightly higher than what other foreigners are offering. I say, okay. I say there's a reason for that. Because first of all, you are welcome to contact, the largest guys here. There are so many of them. The Chinese companies offering the same services, like the structuring companies, getting investment, for example, etc. But most of the time, 90% of the time, they are too big. And when you approach them, they don't first of all offer one-to-one, individualized service. And second, their prices are 10 times higher than of ours. 10 times, minimum 10 times. So we are kind of a middle, and exactly like we said, it's kind of a bridge company, right? We're not trying to take over the Chinese companies here or competing against them. But because of our experience, right, we are, from foreign country, and the languages we speak and the cultures we're coming from, we are playing the bridge role here between other foreign companies and probably the local companies here. And plus, sometimes, you know, if you really want to meet a larger or to speak to the larger, corporate consulting Chinese companies, yeah, you can approach them through us as well. You know, this is what I tell to the client. Sometimes, you know, those big companies, consulting companies here, they don't even respond, they don't even speak sometimes. The difference between them and us, we have some Chinese stuff as well. You know, when you approach them through the Chinese stuff, it's much easier to communicate. So this is, my...
Yeah, that's totally true. I totally agree. And also, I would mention the factor of trust and like being clear on what services you offer and the costs, of course, because what I've experienced with my clients that complain, let's say, about like their experience with working with some Chinese companies, they say, okay, they say like registration of the company is like this amount of money. But then they didn't clarify what it includes.
Exactly.
You know,
this part is very, very
what about your bank accounts? What about a stamp? You know, it's not big amount of money making a stamp for a company, but still it is. Is it included or not?
Exactly,
you know, you really have to clarify it. Which I usually
there are so many steps, actually. You know, literally, like you mentioned, we receive, many clients actually. In the beginning, they say, okay, because of your prices, I need to find different company. Okay, they go ahead and do that. And later on, you know, I received at least every month 2 or 3 clients coming back to me just to, you know, tell about their experience. Okay, it was my mistake. I should have gone with your offer. Right now, that company finished the project, but they have missed a lot of things now, and they are adding extra costs on top of that. So
yeah, that's how they make money, I feel, you know.
It's happening every time. Yes, definitely. So when you actually speak to any company, not only us or the Chinese clients here, just trying to be transparent here. So this is very basic, very basic thing that you have to be extremely precise what you are looking for and what the other company which is taking, you know, offering the services, you know, putting on the quote. Be very precise here, guys. All right, so let me just quickly check the questions again that I listed here, if I missed. All right, one last question. Okay, sorry for apologies for making this video too long, but most of the people are interested. What are your expectations as an expert? You know, after this COVID-19, is it going to affect the business atmosphere in China?
Yes, of course. I mean, I feel like everyone talks about it, and you know, it's understandable. Of course, it affected, you know, everyone. So I think it's kind of normal. Of course, it will influence, and the main thing I would like to talk about here is that well, you've heard about this Chinese concept of Made in China 2025, when they want to turn from this concept of China being a very low-cost manufacturer with a very low labor costs and probably cheap materials, to a country with a better technology. I'm not sure how realistic is that till 2025. But I feel like this is the whole virus thing is just pushing China towards that way, and it's just fast this growth in the direction of technology. I mean, China is already a very technological country. I was surprised because in December I was visiting Japan, and I always had this idea of Japan being so robotic, you know, so technologically advanced. And after living in Shanghai for a while, I got to Tokyo, and I was like, well, you know,
no, I wouldn't.
Is way more tech. I mean, the payment system, you know, like the deliveries and stuff. So I feel like this virus thing mostly will affect that. So the technology will just grow and improve for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Shanghai definitely is one of the most technologically advanced, places right now on earth, actually. And one last element about this question, most of if you look at the opinions on the internet, they're saying that, okay, after the virus, there's because of the virus, there's a lot of negative opinion about the country as a whole, China, like, they're blaming the country, etc., and that's why most of the companies, they are boycotting the Chinese-made products. So do you think there are any other alternatives for to China as a manufacturing hub, so to speak? Like any other potential country that might take over China's role in manufacturing, delivering these low-cost products?
I understand what you mean. So basically, I was reading this very interesting article on Forbes saying that Mexico could be an alternative to China later on. But this is more about like Latin America region, If a business owner wants to manufacture still in Asian region, then I would say Southeast Asia for sure, totally. Materials and like labor costs and stuff. And I have some clients actually moving their businesses to Vietnam, to even Bangladesh, and to Thailand could be also a good option. So China, I feel like, will not exist as an old made in China, manufacturer
definitely. I mean, the role will be changed, right?
Anymore. This is changing totally.
Actually, I mean, if I may add, like this thing, actually, the whole scenario, made in China and low quality product, low quality, the things actually have started changing a couple of years ago already, actually, because when you visit or approach the manufacturers, they start asking now, right? When is where is the final destination of the product? What is the market, right? So before, like maybe 5-10 years ago, that was not the question. You go to the market, you get the product. It was, most of the time, it was low in quality. But right now, you can literally find extremely good quality products in China based on, obviously your budget and the target market, right? You're buying.
Yeah, this is true.
So in a couple of years, we can expect that this concept, made in China, probably will change its role, right? The conception will be totally different.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what China is hoping for, and I guess it is already on that path, So we will see.
Yeah. So once again, thank you, Zukhra. By the way, how should people approach you? What social media do you use except for Instagram?
LinkedIn usually, and of course with my clients, I just work with mails. This is the most common and most convenient. But of course, like LinkedIn is and I also post some articles there. They're usually longer, and I hope the audience also finds them useful. So.
All right. Okay, thank you, Zukhra. Once again, really appreciate your time. So I will leave all the contact details for Zukhra. Once again, she's an expert in intellectual property, contract, labor law, all right? So if you have any questions in mind related to doing business in China, you can approach her. And hopefully, the lockdowns will be lifted and you'll be back to Shanghai so we can meet in person as well. And we'll have some more discussions, interesting discussions.
That would be great. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you.